So as we discussed yesterday, right? So first we will be discussing about uh, skill concepts, and then data warehousing concepts, and then we'll move on to ISCS concepts, right? Now in SQL, okay. So what are the different concepts that we are going to discuss in this class? This part we'll see. Okay. So these classes will be there around 13 to 15 classes. Okay, so 13 to 15 days. So this SQL will be there. Post that, I'll be starting data warehousing concepts. Okay, so let me share my screen. Let me know once you're able to see my screen.
Yes, bro.
Fine. So now SQL. First, let me open the material because I will share this material with everyone. Okay. So if required, just take a printout of this material or you can use soft copy of the material. But my recommendation is like take the printout of this material, keep the material handy so that it will be helpful for your helpful to read. Okay, I hope you are able to see my Word document, right?
Yes, bro.
Now, so these are the concepts that we are going to teach, that I am going to teach, or that we are going to discuss as part of this session. Okay. So first, what is Oracle? Introduction to Oracle. Then, so these three are basically uh, theoretical. So from here, the actual practical sessions are going to get started. So create schemas, users, skill classifications, synonyms, okay, aliases, functions, match statement joins, views, material views. So all these concepts will be discussed. Fine. Now, so anybody having any idea about SQL? And before we start with SQL concepts, I just wanted to understand, anyone having any knowledge about SQL?
Yes, Bhaskar, basic knowledge I have.
Yeah, what kind of knowledge that you have? Can you explain?
Yeah, create database and create tables uh, and after creating the table to load the data in the table and
Okay.
delete operations, update operations.
Very
These
good.
things I have.
Good, good, good. So others, you don't have any knowledge about SQL, right? Fine, that is fine. See, there is nothing to hesitate. Okay, when I ask any question, so you just say yes or no, whether you have it or not. Because accordingly, so I will be uh, teaching, right? So before I teach something, I wanted to know how much knowledge that you have. Okay, accordingly, I'm going to teach. Okay. So if you don't have any skill knowledge, that is also fine. So I'm going to clearly explain, so from scratch, from basics, so that you can easily learn about it. Okay. Now, see, basically, what is the purpose of SQL or what is SQL? SQL is basically SQL is nothing but a structure query language. Okay. So in the entire SQL, what we are going to do is we will be writing SQL statements. For what purpose we are going to write SQL statements? For what purpose we are going to write SQL statements? So basically, why are we going to use SQL first of all before we go to SQL statements? First, we should understand what is Oracle. Why are we going to use Oracle? See, Oracle is a database. Oracle is a database which is going to be used to store the data. What is the data? See, when nowadays everybody is habituated to use the applications, right? Any application. If you take any application, uh, you can take Gmail, you can take Flipkart, you can take Amazon, you can take any application. Okay, any application if you take. So we are doing something in the application. So in order to do something, what we are going to do? First, we will be creating our account, right? Any account like Facebook, Instagram, any account. If you the moment we are going to start using that application, so in the first they'll be asking us to sign up or sign in, right? So when the sign up means the account does not exist in the system. Sign in means so see, the information is already available. I have already created an account. I just wanted to use my account with my user ID and password. Okay, when we do sign up, we will be filling up all the information, first name, last name, email ID, mobile number. Will be yeah, like no location, date of birth, all the information we are going to mention. That is for one time only. From next time onwards, we'll be just using username and password to open our account. Where this information is going to be get stored, where this information will be get stored. So that will be get stored in a backend database. For every application, there will be a backend database. So that database is going to store the data. And whenever we wanted to, so when we log in the application, when we log in the application should be able to read the data from some place where the data was stored. Application should be able to read the data from one place where the data was stored. That means the data has to be stored longer time, 50 years, 100 years like that. Because we don't know until unless we are going to use, we don't know till which date we are going to use this application, right? So it has to stay longer, right? So to stay longer, so that has to store in some place. That storage will call it as a database. So in the database where we are going to store the data. So not only the sign in, sign up, any application, like if you take Flipkart, if you take Amazon, okay. So if you take Flipkart or Amazon, like you will be buying products. Whenever you buy a product, there will be order ID generated. So order place date, shipment date, and deliver date. Okay, invoice will be generated. So all these operations will be happening. So when all these operations are happening, so where these operations are going to be get stored, so those will be get stored in somewhere in the backend database. So the database can be anything like SQL, Microsoft SQL Server, Teradata or AWS, Azure Cloud. Be it the database is whatever it is, but it is going to store in some place. So in order to access all the databases, so we will be writing the SQL statements. Okay. So now you understood what is database.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Others,
Yes, bro.
Sri Hari, Chandu, Vinay.
Yes, sir. Understood, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Now, so people write whoever studied computer science. Okay, if at all any of you studied computer science, you would be getting RDBMS concepts. Or if anybody studied also degree BSc, BCA, so they will be getting these RDBMS concepts. So the same RDBMS is nothing but relational database management system. Okay, so this database was developed by Oracle Corporation. So Oracle is the first database which was developed. Before that, how the data was storing? Anyone having any idea?
In the form of CSV files
Yes,
or in the form of Excel.
yes. in the form of CSV files or Excel files. So initially first, people were writing in books, right? Like if you see some old movies, so for every company there'll be some kind of accountants who will be sitting in front of the home, or who is sitting in the office, and they'll be writing all the accounts, right? All the information. So how many employees that we have, so how much amount that we have given, and how much amount that we got it. So everything initial days, like they'll be writing in books. So when Microsoft Corporation uh invented this computer, so which they by default they have given a notepad. So when the notepad came out, so instead of having books, and the day by day that the data is keep growing, and it was very difficult to store the data in books, and it was very difficult to identify uh, the whole transactions or whole information, because for every book it will be having 100 pages or 200 pages. So how much information we can write in 100 or 200 pages, right? So hundreds of books that we are using for that, to keep that in, there will be separate racks, separate rooms, and just to identify some information. So we will search for the entire library, and even we don't know in which book this information is there, right? Now, then when Microsoft Corporation they invented this computer concept, they started with the notepad in an electronic device. So computer is an electronic device. So then it was a place where they are keeping the information in notepad. So they felt like, so at least this notepad is better than book, because in the notepad we will be having a limitation, and all the notepad documents will be there in one computer. So we don't need to search anywhere, right? We can keep a lot of information there. So same Microsoft Corporation, they also built an application called Microsoft Excel. When they build Excel, so with this is more comfortable when compared with the notepads, because when we wanted to retrieve the data, it is very much easy, because we will be having filters to filter out the data and get it. But even then, in Excel also we have a limitation to store 1 lakh lines or like that, 10,000 lines or 50,000 lines. There is a limitation. So we will have to have the information in multiple sheets. So when for a retail organization, okay, so every day hundreds of customers will be purchasing hundreds of products. Now, for each and every product purchase, like they'll be making an entry. Like when we go to a supermarket, even if you buy 1 rupee chocolate, they'll be giving a slip, right? So when you go to any mall, or when you go to any when you go to any mall, when you go to any shop, they'll be giving a slip. So whatever you purchase, they'll be giving a slip, right? So when they're giving a slip means they'll be entering that information in the system. That system is generating the slip. When they are entering something in the system, so the data will be stored in the backend database. So like that, every day, hundreds of customers will be coming into the shop or supermarket or any company. So when hundreds of people are purchasing every day, hundreds of transactions will be generating, and it was very difficult to store everything in a single place called Excel. So then, when people are facing that kind of an issue, Oracle Corporation came up with an idea of database concept. Okay, so this Oracle Corporation came up with a concept of database. Now, this database is going to be used to store the data, to collect all the information and put it in a single place called database, and which is required a memory. The way how we are going to use mobile phone. So as much as memory that we have, 128 GB, 256 GB. So those many photos, those many videos, those many movies, everything we can download and keep it. So in order to store that information, all they need is the storage. So if it is having 128 GB, we can store some 5,000 photos. So if you have 56 GB, we can store 5,000 photos and 100 movies like that, right? Now, so for the database also, it is going to apply the same concept. as much as we are increasing the memory, that much data we can store in the database, in a single database. Okay, so database is going to be used to store the data. Okay, now when we are going to store the data, so all the data will not be stored in one place. Okay, because there will be customer information should be there. There will be product should be information should be there. There should be sales information should be there. There will be budget information should be there. There are HR teams, marketing teams, different other teams will be working on a working for an organization. When different teams are working on in a single organization, and different teams are collecting different kinds of information. If we cannot store all the information to a single table, so in the database, the data will be stored in the form of tables. So all the information we cannot keep it in a single table. We are going to segregate the tables. We are going to segregate the tables, and the application, whoever is going to build the application by using Java, .NET, right? So they will be, when I'm going to insert this kind of information, so just insert into this table. When I'm going to insert this kind of information, insert into other table. When I'm going to insert the other sales information, just insert into this table. When I'm going to launch new product, this product information store into this table. So in the backend, they will be assigning the individual tables. So when we fill up in the application, the front-end application, so the data will be stored in the backend respective tables, whatever are being assigned. All the data is not going to be stored in a single table. So data in the database is going to be stored in the form of tables. Okay, there will be hundreds of tables. So for each requirement, for each kind of data, we are going to store in a different tables. Now, when we have these many tables, so there will be many admin activities, like who should access this table, who should not access this table, who should be able to log into the database, who should not be able to log into the database. So all these callers administrating system administrators are going to take care of this. So the background, so when we are having some tables, it's not like storing it, right? It has to function. So whenever we write any SQL statements, it has to give the data. Like, when we are going to create a table, the backend database should be having functionality to accept the SQL statement and work as per the SQL statement have been executed. So there will be some algorithm has been written in the backend and to execute these SQL statements. When this algorithm has to execute, there should be some system in the backend that has to function. So that function or that system, we will call it as RDBMS, Relational Database Management System. Okay. Now, when RDBMS, see, there are two parts here. One is admin activity, the other one is development activity. Okay, admin activity, they'll be taking care of the backend activities like giving permissions, creating users, okay, reworking the users, and data migrations one place to another place. Okay, so like that, so the admin activities will be there, but we are not going to work as an admin. Okay, we are going to work as a developer. So we just wanted to understand the concept which is relevant to the developers. Okay, now, so this is the word that you will have to remember your lifetime. So SQL. Okay, SQL means structure English query language. Okay, structure English query language. So SQL. That means this is an SQL statement. So whatever the SQL statements that we are going to write, so that we will call it as a SQL. That we will call it as a SQL. So because when you get into real time, so in the real time, people will be asking, so can you share me the SQL? Can you write the SQL? What is there in the SQL? What is the condition in that SQL? So this word, you guys will be frequently listen or frequently used. So when you are going to ask something that, this SQL statement, can you give this SQL statement? So in a technical terminology, we have to say it as a, can you show me that SQL? Okay. So this is the difference between the people who learned, who really worked. People who really worked, they'll say that it is a SQL. People who learned, they'll say it is a SQL statement. They'll say it is SQL. Okay. So that is the reason when you are practicing it, you should practice in such a way that you really worked in the system. You really worked in a project. Okay. Now this SQL is divided into two parts, SQL and PLSQL. So SQL is basically a structured query language where we'll be writing some statements, some queries. So there is no programming. But PLSQL is procedure language for SQL. So here we are going to write a programming. But when we work as an ETL developer, we just need only SQL part. We don't need a PL/SQL. If at all somebody is going to ask you that, do you know PLSQL? Do you know PLSQL concepts? Okay, when somebody is going to ask you about PLSQL concepts, then you should say that you don't have any idea about PL/SQL. But but there is a but so if at all you have interest. Okay, so when somebody is going to ask you about PLSQL, you can directly say that you don't have any idea about PLSQL. But if you really have an interest, because I learned all these many concepts and it is easy for me to understand all this SQL, I'll also try to learn PL/SQL concepts. Yeah, I can give the material for PL/SQL, hands-on material. So you can practice with that. So in PL/SQL, we'll be having only four, five concepts: procedures, functions, triggers, packages, like that. Four, five concepts are there. So if you really wish to learn, yeah, I can give the materials. But as part of the course, I'm going to teach about SQL concepts. Now, as I told, database. So in a database, so where we are going to create multiple users, multiple schemas. In a single database, we will be having a lot of schemas or a lot of users. It is a collection of schemas and user. Each schema is having its own functionalities, its own tables. Because when we get into real time, if you see the real time project databases, we'll be having different schemas for different purposes, like for staging layer, one schema, for data mart layer, one schema, for data warehouse, one schema. So in a single database, we'll be having multiple schemas where we are going to store the data. So each schema data is for its own purpose. That's why we call it as database is nothing but it's a collection of schemas or users. Schema or user both are same only. Now, what is a schema? Schema is nothing but it is a collection of objects like tables, views, etc., etc. As I told, right, all the data will be get resided in the form of table only. Okay, all the tables will be get stored in the data in the form of all the data will be stored in the database in the form of tables. So in tables, the data will be stored in the form of rows and columns. Data will be stored in the form of rows and columns. Okay. Now we know what is database, we know what is a schema or a user, and we know what is a table. Right? Data will be stored in the form of rows and columns. Now, first we should understand. Now we have a database. Okay. So this database, see, we as a developer, we are not going to do anything with the database. Okay. Now we should know what is a schema and how do we create a schema, and we should know what is a table and how are we going to do with the table, because everything we are going to play with the tables only. The entire SQL is depending upon these tables only. So data will be there in the table. We have to play with that. Okay. Now how to create a user, right? So before I start with how to create a user, so when we get time, so we are going to use a tool called SQL Developer. We are going to use a tool called SQL Developer. So this is the tool we will use in real time, and this is the tool which I'm going to give you guys for your practice also. So that when you go to real time also, you will not face or you will not feel any new or surprise things, because whatever the tool that you are learning now, the same tool will be there in real time also. Okay, so this is an SQL developer tool. So this SQL developer tool is having three sections. Okay, one is left hand side navigation panel. So in the navigation panel where we'll be having connections and reports. So reports we don't need to worry about it, but connections will be having in the left hand side navigation panel. In the right side, you'll be having workspace and output window. So these connections will not be there. So the moment when you are going to install your database, so these connections will not be there for you. So you will be having empty here, or you'll be having just these Oracle connections. You will have to okay. So now in the left hand side, you will not be having any connections the day when you are going to install SQL Developer. You will have to create the connection for every schema. Okay, for every schema, you are going to create a connection here. So the connections information you will have to get from your team members in real time. You will have to get these connection details from your team members, and you will have to create this connection. Okay, now this is the place, we'll call it as a workspace where we are going to write the SQL statements, and this is the place we'll call it as an output window. This is workspace. This is output window. This is navigation panel. Okay, so in the navigation panel where we are going to create the connections Workspace is the place where we are going to write the SQL statements. Output window is the place where we are going to see the output of the SQL statement. Okay. So this is about SQL developer. And now how do we create a connection? So by default, when we install, when I'm going to install, okay, I will be creating, by default, there will be user created by default. Now, the moment you are going to open this SQL developer, okay, so you will have to click on this plus symbol. There will be a pop-up open. Here it is going to ask. So by default, there will not be any connections here. Now what we have to do is we will have to create the connection. When we have to create the connection, let's say I'm going to let me delete these connections. So the moment you are going to open this SQL statement, sorry, SQL developer, you will be having connections like this. So if you don't have any connection, you will not be able to open any worksheets. When you don't have any worksheet, you will not be able to write any query. When you are not going to write any query, you will not be able to see any output. To do that, the first step is you will have to configure the connections. To configure the connection, just click on this plus symbol. There will be a pop-up opened. In the pop-up, just type to which connection that you will have to connect, or to which schema that you will have to connect. So there will be by default one schema will be created called system. Okay, this is schema. Will be by default will be there. Okay. Now, what is the username for system? System is the username. So if I am going to install, I will be giving the password as admin. AD MIN. Click on save, and then this local host name. When you are practicing here, the host name is localhost, and port number is 1521. SID is XC. When you get into real time, this information, the username, password, host name, port, SID, service name, all the information that you will have to get from your team members. So to which schema that you are going to connect, so your name should be with that. Okay. So this is the name that you need to define for your understanding in your machine, because this is not going to be created in the backend database. So this connection will be there in only in your system. So once you give this name and give the username, password, host, port, SID, then you need to click on test. So you have to see the test status as success. You should not directly connect as soon as you've given the username, password, and all the information, because sometimes this username, password might work, might not work. Sometimes we might type the wrong password. When we type the wrong password, when we try to click on 2 3 times, that user will be get logged out. So when the user get logged out again, it's going to be an escalation. So it's going to be an escalation. People will come back to you, and you have to give a justification. Why did you enter the wrong password multiple times? So that is the reason you will have to test the connection first. When you test the connection, you need to see the status of test, whether it is success, failure. So if it is success, then you have to save the connection. And you need to also make sure you have to click on the save password. If you don't click on this property, save password, every time when you open, there will be pop-up to enter the password. Now the status is success. I saved it, then I am connecting it. Okay. So there will be a lot of, we can create n number of connections. So for each connection, we can open n number of worksheets. There is no hard rule that, for one worksheet, we have to use only one. So for one worksheet, we can write, for one connection, we can create multiple worksheets. Okay. Any questions till here? Anyone having any questions?
No.
No, bro.
Like, understood clearly?
Yes,
No,
bro.
sir.
Fine. Yeah, I think this is enough for today. Okay. And we'll meet on Monday. Okay. So in the meantime, please pay the fee amount and get the installation done. I'll give the accesses so that you just open this SQL developer and try to understand this. Okay. So
Yeah, okay, sir.
Monday I'm going to start with the actual practical sessions. Okay, then, Chilo. Bye bye. Have a
Bye,
great
bro.
weekend.